House Resolution 500. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Babin, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment would delay the implementation and enforcement of the electronic logging device mandate, currently set to go into effect this December the 18th until the end of the next fiscal year, September the 30th, 2018. But while this amendment is certainly about trucking, truckers, and the businesses and jobs that depend on them, I think it speaks to something more, something that all of us who have the privilege here in the People's House are absolutely here to do. Reducing the regulatory burdens put in motion by previous administrations is one of our most important jobs here in Congress, to encourage entrepreneurship and to create jobs in America. This ELD mandate is one such regulation. I am honored to stand with the independent truckers, our nation's agricultural producers, and countless small businesses to offer this bipartisan amendment and fight on their behalf. More than 30 associations have endorsed this. Let's make something clear. My amendment will not ban ELDs, and it will not repeal the mandate from going into effect at a future date. All my amendment does is delay the mandatory requirement that almost every interstate hauling truck will have to pay for and install one of these devices by the end of this year. For those who have already installed an ELD and are satisfied with it, my message is simple. If you like your ELD, you can keep your ELD. And while it's too late to use the Congressional Review Act on this regulation, it's not too late to act. Passage of this amendment in the underlying bill will set us on the course to protect small businesses and prevent a major disruption to the freight and shipping network just 1 week before this Christmas. To all my colleagues on the Appropriations Committee, I say thank you for Section 132 of this bill, which already provides relief from the ELD mandate for livestock haulers. Please join me now to give relief to all American truckers. And to all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, I say another year will give the President time to nominate and confirm a full-time director of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, allow for waivers and exemptions to be examined and adjudicated, alleviate the sticker shock for installation and compliance facing small trucking companies this December the 18th. We may disagree on many sorts of issues, but we will all go home on the weekend to districts where small businesses are the very backbone of our local communities and our economy. Let's give them a hand. Let's take another year and get this thing right. I urge support for my amendment and the underlying bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. Does the member seek time in opposition?
I claim the time in opposition.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 5 minutes in opposition.
I rise in opposition to the amendment. Truck crash deaths in this country have increased significantly in recent years. That should be the backdrop of this discussion. 4,067 people were killed in crashes involving large trucks in 2015 alone. That's a 20% increase since 2009. And studies show that driver fatigue, that's what this amendment is all about. Driver fatigue is an important part of the problem. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration and the National Transportation Safety Board repeatedly have recommended that all trucks and buses be equipped with ELDs. In 2012, Congress decided to take strong action to address this problem, passed a requirement for the use of ELDs with bipartisan support as a part of the MAP 21 legislation. Supporters of this amendment say that the enforcement community is not ready to begin enforcement by December 18th. That's really not the case. And it's also true that inspectors aren't going to pull truckers out of service for noncompliance until April 1 of next year. That's a considerable grace period. It'll give the trucking and the enforcement community ample time to adjust to the mandate. The Department of Transportation has estimated that the benefits of adopting ELDs to be over $1 billion. So implementing the mandate makes financial sense, and it certainly makes sense in terms of the safety of our people, the safety on our roads. So I urge opposition to this amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Yes, sir. I would answer that some of the companies with the worst safety records have had a full slate of ELDs in their fleet for many years. There's evidence absolutely to the contrary of what the gentleman just said. Also, the Obama administration, who signed this bill into law during a time when the House was Republican, the Senate was Democrat, estimates, the Department of Transportation estimates that the cost of compliance for this bill, for this mandate, is over $2 billion. That comes from the previous administration itself. So I would urge my colleagues to support this amendment and to give relief to the small businesses. 3 out of 4 truckers are in favor of delaying the implementation of this mandate.
Gentleman reserves.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Crawford.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to Mr. Babin's amendment, which delays the FMCSA's electronic logging device rulemaking. While well-intentioned, this delay would endanger public safety by giving commercial vehicle operators the ability to exceed the federal hours of service limits. In 2012, Congress passed the Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century Act, or MAP 21, which instructed the FMCSA to issue a rulemaking requiring the use of ELDs in commercial vehicles. Congress again reaffirmed the ELD requirement in the FAST Act and fiscal year 2016 appropriations. The American Trucking Association was in lockstep with Congress, and thousands of fleet owners across the country have taken steps to adopt this technology and train their drivers as Congress intended. After 5 years, FMCSA has completed this rulemaking and has done so in the proper way by conferring with industry and Congress and holding public meetings in advance of implementation. I can appreciate that my friends in agriculture industry, some of my closest friends, I serve on the Ag Committee as well as the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, would like to see a delay of the ELD rule. Instead of this amendment being a catch-all delay, perhaps my friend could have structured a more precise exemption for those in niche segments of transportation like agriculture. This is a policy many would have considered supporting. Additional 30 seconds?
3 seconds.
Thank you. In closing, Mr. Chairman, I ask my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to oppose this well-intentioned amendment, a policy that secured nearly unanimous support in our conference when it was enacted, and work with an administration who understands smart, consumer safety-minded regulations like this. We can work with the President, Secretary Chow, and others at FMCSA to address some of the concerns my friend from Texas has without undoing the progress that's been made to ensure our highways are safer with ELDs. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Westerman.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in opposition to this amendment. I have great respect for my colleague, Mr. Babin, who introduced this amendment, and understand his intentions. I just believe that it's too late in the game to be changing this rule. There are many companies who have invested in this technology. We seem to have a problem in Congress where we can't give clear direction to businesses, and therefore it creates a lot of uncertainty. They sometimes make investments, and the rules change. And this would be a time when the rules would change before this investment would even be made. There's been specific issues like livestock that have been addressed already in committee. And again, I vote on this amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman from North Carolina. The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Yeah, how much time do I have left, Mr. Chairman?
1 minute.
1 minute. I would just say, in answer to my colleagues from Arkansas, I appreciate what they're saying. However, the truth is that there's a lot of confusion. This is a mandate. Well, many of us came to Congress here to roll back these types of mandates and this type of regulatory bureaucracy which stifles the entrepreneurship and the creation of jobs. We are not trying to do away with this mandate. What we're trying to do is delay it so that we can adjudicate and study and let people find out exactly how much it will cost, because there is some dispute there. If you like your ELD, you can keep your ELD. I yield back.
Yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Vote, please.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas will be postponed.